Alrighty, we are back with Catalyst by Lisa Beeson, chapter 33. We only have 2 chapters left, chapter 33 and chapter 34. Very exciting. I will say, once we're done with this, I think I'm going to take a little break from the series, get a little more variety on my channel, and read The Tale of Emily Winsnap by Liz Kessler. I want to get some more. This is very much a kid's book, and I want to get some more kids' books up on the channel, as well as variety. I know we're kind of leaving Twilight behind. Maybe I'll go to Twilight after that. I don't know. But just a little break, get a short book out there, and then we'll see what happens next after that. Unless any of you are requesting to move straight on into the next book in the series, then of course I will do as my avid readers would like, or avid listeners would like. But here we go. Chapter 33 of Catalyst by Lisa Beeson. The brutal summer sun was scorching the back of Cam's neck as he watched the parade from his hidden perch on the rooftop. The dormant volcano sitting in the middle of the Caribbean island of Nevis was a dramatic backdrop for the revelers of Charlestown. The music festival was the islanders' take on Carnival, and though the Red Death scare had significantly diminished tourist attendance, the locals took it as an opportunity to let off steam and celebrate life. As the lively calypso music floated up from below, Cam kept an eye on Cass and Hugo, who were pretending to be tourists among the throng of dancers watching the parade of band floats make their way through the streets. After meeting back in Delphi Falls, the two had taken to each other quite quickly. Well, Hugo took to Cass quite quickly. You could never really tell what was going on in Cass's head, so it didn't take much acting for them to portray an actual couple. Cam thought that it was good for Hugo, finding love in desperate times and all, but they were supposed to be watching for Cale in the crowd, not each other. Cam wished Cass hadn't sent Noah back to Scion's Keep with Jamie, Joshua, Alvaro, and George. He could have really used another set of tactically trained eyes. Wyatt was trying his best to stay close enough to Hugo to shield his energy output from the suits, while he discreetly talked to Randall and Miles on his Bluetooth earpiece. But the tall Aryan poster boy stood out like a sore thumb in the predominantly darker-skinned population. Cam knew that no matter what precautions they took, Cale had known the minute they had stepped on the island, and no matter what Cass saw in her vision, he wasn't the kind of guy to get drunk and dance in the streets. He was the kind of guy that if he wasn't keen on being found, he'd have no qualms taking them out just to get them out of his hair. So it was a good thing Cam had taken it upon himself to slip away from the headquarters Miles and the Randall had set up in the rented beach house they were staying in to watch over Cass, Hugo, and Wyatt. Cam used his keen eyesight to zoom in and scan the other rooftops, and the crowd for anyone resembling Cale, Reed, Tober, or anyone else that might be in their employ. It was strange watching out for the same people who had trained him to do so. He happened to skim by Wyatt when he started tapping on his earpiece with a confused and frustrated look on his face. By reading his lips, Cam could tell he was saying, "Rand?" over and over again. Then a large man with graying sandy blonde hair and a red beard casually put an arm around Wyatt's shoulders, while discreetly digging the muzzle of a handgun into his ribs with his other. Cam cursed under his breath. "Damn it, Reed!" Cam knew Reed and Tober eagerly jumped to do whatever Cale commanded, but it still hurt to see the Scotsman, who had become like an uncle to him, do something so villainous. Reed said something to Wyatt with a savage smile that made Wyatt's face blanch even paler than it already was, before he led him away down a side street. Cam leapt into action, glad that he had borrowed Randall's 9mm pistol and Miles' modified taser before he left. Climbing down the backside of the building, Climbing down the backside of the building, he vaulted over a balcony railing to a lower balcony and jumped the last few feet to the back alley below. Just as he was about to run after Reed and Wyatt, he was suddenly lifted off the ground and slammed up against the building. The back of his head cracked painfully against the wall, and it took a second for his vision to clear enough to see the baleful stare of the man holding him up by his neck. With his hair grown out and a full beard covering most of his face, Cale looked more like a retired military expat than a polished billionaire that he had been the last time Cam had seen him. Everything about the ridiculously muscled man was pure menace. If Cam wasn't so furious at him, he'd be pissing his pants in fear. "What the bloody hell are you doing here, boy?" Cale asked in a harsh whisper. "Screw you!" Cam croaked. He took one of his hands away from Cale's wrist to go for the taser at his side, but he quickly found that it and the gun on his other side were gone. Cale must have taken them without Cam even being aware of it. He grabbed at Cale's shoulders and tried to knee him in the crotch, but Cale easily deflected the attempt with the turn of his hips and applied more pressure against Cam's windpipe, causing Cam's eyes to tear up. Cam knew the bastard could kill him easily if he chose, so he gave up struggling and Cale eased the pressure a bit. "Where's Ari?" Cale asked. "What do you care?" Cam said through gritted teeth, trying to ease the pressure on his neck by touching the ground with the toes of his shoes. "I thought you were done with her now that she was of no use to you." Cale's eyes narrowed. "What are you going on about?" "You knew that she was your relative, but you decided to keep that bit of information to yourself. You used her anyway. How can you live with yourself?" Cam was satisfied to see the split second of shock in Cale's eyes before he controlled his features. "Yeah, she knows about the whole blood bond thing now. Ever since she woke up from the blast, she's been slowly getting her memories back." Cam looked down at him in bitter anger and disgust as he wheezed more air into his lungs. "She sacrificed herself to save your sorry ass. And when she defied every freaking odd and survived, missing an effing leg, the first person she asked for was you. But you were gone. You abandoned her when she needed you the most, and you absolutely crushed her, you asshole. If I had any chance of killing you for that, believe me, I would." "She thinks I abandoned her?" Cale asked as though the possibility never occurred to him. "What else is she supposed to think? You took off as soon as you could get rid of her." Cale's eyes hardened and his grip tightened a fraction on Cam's neck. "I didn't abandon her, you ignorant little pissant. I left her with you, in a place I thought she would be safe, while I went to get the real bloody bastards that almost killed her before the trail got cold." Cale growled, barely holding back his fury. "What?" Cam thought, confused. Then it occurred to him. "Sweet baby Jesus. You guys are the terrorists attacking all those places, aren't you? They're all linked to Anaximander, aren't they? Give the boy a prize. He's finally using his bloody head." "But you didn't say that. You just tossed your broken necklace at me and said you had things to take care of. I thought that you meant you were going after another stone." "I was going underground to do some serious espionage shite. I wasn't about to go advertising that fact. And it was a good thing I didn't, because that bloody place appears to be riddled with Anaximander's moles." "What? Who?" "You brought 2 of them with you, you idiot," he said. "The Reinhold brothers have been sending encrypted messages to a signal coming from New Mexico the whole bloody time you've been here." "New Mexico is where Gordon's sister runs a place like Scion's Keep. They're probably just keeping Mara informed of what's happening." "Just before you showed up, we traced that exact signal through 4 different dummy access points to an abandoned fallout bunker under the Burrow Mountains. Do you want to know why we were so bloody interested in that signal, boy?" Cam just stared back at him defiantly, not really wanting to hear the answer. "Because with all the intel we've compiled, we now know that the signal is coming from Anaximander's very own bloody headquarters." Cam shook his head in denial. Wyatt had been nothing but cool to him. Admittedly, it was no stretch to believe Mara and her sons were evil. But Gordon? Gordon can't be in on it. He's the chill, hipster grandpa. He can't be the bad guy. Then it hit him like an iron pan to the cranium. Scion's Keep is the damn honey, isn't it? Cale only narrowed his eyes and stared at him like he was speaking nonsense. And we were all the damn flies. The suits are the vinegar, and Scion's Keep is the honey. You know the saying, you can catch more flies with honey than vinegar? Cam could have kicked himself for his stupidity. They've been lulling us into complacency. We've been working for Anaximander the entire effing time. He wondered just how many of them were in on it. Not Miles. Ari had given him her seal of approval. If he'd been shady, she would have known it. It had to just be the Reinholds. They were the only people Ari couldn't read. They must have used Scion's Keep to lure Miles in to keep him busy, so he wouldn't be able to do any more damage, since he'd already shut down their system before. That's why he hasn't been able to make any progress tracking down Val and Soren. Wyatt and Randall have been sabotaging the whole time. Where's Tober? Cam asked it with a spike of fear. He better not have hurt Miles. Taking care of the other Reinhold brother. Now where is Ari, boy? Cale asked more forcefully. You two don't go anywhere without each other, and she's not on the bloody island. Cam closed his eyes before he breathed out wretchedly. The shades got her. Cale slammed him against the wall again. How the bloody hell did they do that, boy? What the hell did we train you for? You were supposed to protect her. It took a second for Cam to recover, not just from the painful blow against the wall, but from the fact that Cale had pinpointed exactly what had been eating him up since the moment he realized she was gone. He hadn't protected her. He let her slip away into the clutches of evil. Ow! Cam coughed out with a petulant scowl, hiding his feelings of failure with a resentful glare. Those demon bastards took one of the other kids from Scion's Keep, and Ari snuck out to go save her without telling me. By the time I found out about it, she disappeared without a trace. It had genuinely hurt Cam to find out that Ari had left without him. And when they had gotten to that alley, the only things they found were a crazed druggie spouting off about bedlam banquets and jackalopes, and Ari's cracked skin cuff, with text from him that he'd never sent. It had killed him to see what she had written. I'll fight by your side always, brother. She'd gone off to take on the shades. She didn't think that she'd survive. She'd been telling him goodbye. Cam fought back the emotion building in his chest. He wasn't going to break down in front of Cale. Cass said that she's still alive, but we wouldn't be able to get her back unless we found you. Who the hell is Cass? Cale asked, but then his head cut to the left as though he'd just heard something. Cam looked over and saw Cass and Hugo walking towards them. Judging by the look on Cass's face, all calm confidence and a knowing stare, she had known all along things were going to play out as they did. She'd known about the Reinhold brothers, and she'd been counting on Cale to take them down. And judging by the look on Hugo's face, all barely contained outrage and disbelief, she'd only just now filled him in on it. You sneaky little minx. I am Cass, she informed Cale in a firm, authoritative tone. Now would you please put the boy down? We have much to discuss. I see darkness, pain, warmth, heat, too much heat, burning, bubbles and liquid, viscous liquid entering her lungs, choking, panic, muted voices, acceptance, comfort, peace. When Ari finally regained full consciousness, her instincts were on high alert, but her mind was fogged with confusion. Where am I? Adam? Jean-Baptiste? Opening her eyes, she was glad to see that she wasn't frozen on the mountaintop anymore. In fact, she was actually quite warm, but her surroundings were decidedly strange. The bed-like apparatus she was attached to was sized to her proportions and fit the contours of her body perfectly. The garments she was wearing were made of the same material Absalom wore in the in-between, and felt as soft as lambskin. The pants fit like leggings that cut off right below her knees, and the shirt was a smock with quarter-length sleeves. It wasn't something that she'd normally pick out for herself, but it was so comfortable, she really didn't care. The walls were made of a white stone that gave off its own ambient glow, and the ceiling seemed to be made of some kind of quartz crystal, letting in light from above. Then she noticed the musical hum of the bright, colorful energy flowing through it. The kaleidoscopic light show entranced her with its pulses of prismatic beauty, until she realized she wasn't alone. There was someone behind her. Trying to sit up, she started to panic when she couldn't move. She felt a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Be still," a male voice said in an accented English behind her, "and I will detach you from the biomonitors. The treatment is complete." Treatment? What treatment? Where the heck am I? She felt a snapping sensation throughout her whole body. Once the feeling in her limbs returned and her body began to obey her again, she took the opportunity to sift across the room away from the bed, balancing lightly on the balls of her feet, ready to defend herself if necessary. "Please, be still. I am not your enemy. You are safe," said the man with the silver mercurial eyes, the same as Absalom. Another Shazaman. But even though his eyes were the same as Absalom, there were marked differences between the two. This man was human, or at least something like it, though his Shaza was brighter than any human or progeny Arya had ever seen. She had a sense of advanced age, but his body was still strong and bearing sharp and precise. His head was completely shaven, and there were strange silver markings on his scalp, around his eyes, and across his collarbone. He wore a necklace adorned with an amulet that had the iridescent, colorful spectrum of a type of labradorite. His clothes were of the same material as Ari's, but he and the style of his garments looked as though they had just walked out of ancient Egyptian hieroglyph. "You have questions," he stated in a matter-of-fact tone. He exuded the same calm reassurance as Absalom. Ari relaxed her stance since there was no obvious threat. "Understatement," she threw back in the same tone. It was then she realized her body wasn't thrumming with dark energy anymore. She felt disheartened and hollow, like she had a massive spiritual hangover. But at least she wasn't a monster anymore. She also still had her pendant around her neck and Nakar's signet ring on her finger. They hadn't taken them from her. The man inclined his head, as if inviting her to ask questions. "Okay, well, first off, who are you? And what is this treatment I completed?" "My name is Bennu," he said, and her thoughts immediately went to the ancient Egyptian deity of the same name, who is linked with the sun, creation, and rebirth. "Because of your cloaking rune, we were not able to find you as quickly as we wished," he continued, "so the treatment was for your advanced stage of hypothermia. I was chosen to watch over you during the duration of the treatment. It was a delicate process, considering you are a unique being, and you have begun the transition into maturity." "Where are we? How did you know to look for me?" "We heard your call to us before your companions crossed the veil into the sacred garden. We were highly impressed that you were able to find us, let alone penetrate the field of the veil." Ari didn't understand anything he was talking about, and too weary to even try. But there was something she needed to know, even though she was terrified of the answer. "My companions. What happened to them? Are they alive?" "They successfully completed the transformation. They were chosen wisely," he said, with another slight nod of his head in deference to her, as though she had any idea of what he was talking about. "What do you mean, transformation? What did you do to them? If they hurt Adam and Jean-Baptiste in any way, she was going to tear this place apart, sacred or not. They are perfectly fine, Bennu assured her. Both men were on the brink of death. We were inclined to help them, but humans are not permitted past the veil. So they were given the choice. What choice? To pass on from this life and remain as they were, born, or risk the trials of the transformation. What kind of choice is that? Ari forced herself to breathe through the dread crushing her lungs. She couldn't help thinking about what Jashar had said about the invaders turning the shades from humans into what they were. What have they transformed into? They have each become a transcendent and have been inducted into the Shazaman order. They will start their watch as guardians. Guardians? Guardians of what? Of you, he said simply. They chose to transcend for you. Ari's heart physically hurt. Because of her, Adam and Jean-Baptiste weren't human anymore. She was so tired of people believing that she was more than what she was. I'm not worth all this. She hadn't even had time to process what Absalom had told her in the in-between. Had she been Absalom's sister in another life? Was she the reincarnation of the Anu colonist the Shade had worshipped? The only thing Ari could do to keep herself from spiraling into a complete mental breakdown was to breathe slowly in and out as she paced. Suck it up and adapt. You have to adapt. You must adapt. When she felt that she had begun to gain some control, she let out a deep, resigned sigh and asked, Okay, so what now? Come, he said, beckoning her to follow. Now that your treatment is over, Mother Am wishes to speak with you. Who is Mother Am? She is the keeper of the tree. Of course she is. Why not? Ari thought ruefully. She will be able to answer your questions more fully. Ari wasn't sure about any of this, but her scalp wasn't tingling and warning, and she got nothing but good vibes from Bennu. She still didn't have any shoes on, but neither did Bennu, so she shrugged it off and followed him barefoot. He pressed his hand to the wall. A pocket door she hadn't realized was there opened up to the most beautiful and fantastical place she had ever seen. The room they had been in was part of some kind of pod attached to a massive tree. There were hundreds of pods among the grove of primordial trees, all of them connected by stairs and bridges, consisting of the same glowing white mineral as the pods, which reminded her of the memory she had of when she first met Absalom. They were shaded by living vines and branches of knotted wood that were somehow grown and shaped into intricately designed railings and pergolas. Below them, all manner of flora and fauna were coexisting in a symbiotic utopia. The sights, sounds, smells, and the harmonic, peaceful feeling of the place. It was all so beautiful that Ari almost broke down in tears. Wait, the sacred garden? No, it can't be. It's just a myth. Bennu, is this Eden? Ari asked tentatively as they started to descend, not believing those words actually left her lips. Bennu glanced back at her with a knowing smile. Our home has been called by many names throughout the ages, but yes, it has been known as Eden. Cam gently massaged his raw, abused throat as the four of them walked up the porch steps to the rented beach house. Cass had refused to explain anything until they were inside. Just as Hugo was about to open the door, Cam heard Miles roar out in agony. He immediately pushed past Cale and Hugo and burst through the door, ready to take on anything, then stopped short to take in the scene before him. Wyatt and Randall were expertly tied to two of the dining table chairs in the middle of the open living room, their mouths duct-taped shut. Miles was angrily pacing back and forth, grumbling various curse words and gingerly holding his injured right hand to his chest. He had apparently just punched the crap out of Randall's face. Tober was in the kitchen doing something on the counter by the sink, and Reed was lounging on the couch with a glass of water, watching it all with an amused smirk on his face. When Reed saw Cam, he looked as though he was about to say something in greeting, but then Hugo stormed past Cam and front-kicked Wyatt square in the chest, knocking the air out of the man's lungs and causing his chair to fall backwards with a sickening thud against the floor. Hugo was on top of Wyatt in a second, grabbing the front of his shirt threateningly with one hand and savagely ripping off the duct tape over his mouth with the other, eliciting a painful yelp. "What have you done with Eric, you two-faced, lying sack of Hugo, please calm down," Cass said in a warning tone as Reed and Cale pulled him away from the dazed Wyatt. Even for a man of his size, it was useless trying to fight against Reed and Cale, so Hugo reluctantly stopped struggling, and they let him go. "These swine and their father," Hugo said, pointing accusingly at the Reinholds, "had my nephew kidnapped and have been doing who knows what to him for almost 4 years, while they smiled and lied to my face pretending to be my friends. My sister's last wish was for me to take care of her children, and I just sent her youngest son back into that hornet's nest, and you expect me to calm down?" "Yes, I do," Cass said, eyeing him levelly. "You have every reason to be upset about Eric, but Joshua is nowhere near Scion's Keep and is perfectly safe." "What? How?" Hugo asked. "Noah and Jamie," Cam said, figuring it out. "They know about the Reinholds, and once they were away from Randall and Wyatt, they told the others." Cass nodded. "But we need more intel to save the kidnapped children, so it wouldn't be wise to beat these two senseless if we want to get any coherent information out of them." "Aye, that's what Tober's toolbox is for," Reed said with the tip of his glass towards Tober, who was carrying a tray full of wicked-looking torture instruments. He set the tray down on the coffee table and sat down on the couch to begin prioritizing the various tools he was eager to use. When he realized what was in store for them, Randall cursed behind the duct tape, and he began struggling against his bonds. "That won't be necessary, gentlemen," Cass said, then motioned for Reed to lift Wyatt's chair back up to its upright position. She then went to grab a chair of her own from around the dining table. While Cass got situated and Reed roughly raised Wyatt's chair back up to a sitting position, Cam stepped closer to Miles and quietly asked if his hand was okay. His throat still felt like he'd swallowed broken glass from Cale's rough treatment. Miles shrugged. "I think I might have broken it on the bastard's stupid face. But was it worth it?" "Oh, no. But it was worth it, right?" Cam asked with a smirk. "Oh, hell yeah," Miles said, giving him an identical smirk. "Well, other than that, I'm glad you're okay," Cam mumbled gruffly, keeping his eyes on the action in front of them. It was hard for him to admit how much Miles had come to mean to him. Now that he knew what kind of man his father really was, the thought of losing him... Miles brought his good hand around to squeeze Cam's shoulder. "I'm glad you're okay, too. You scared the crap out of me when you disappeared like that. Just give me a heads up next time, all right? I'll always be by your side." Cam was surprised at how cool Miles was about it all, and how awesome it felt to know that he was there for him. Cam quickly glanced at Miles and nodded with the slightest hint of a smile. "Okay, Dad," he said, and Miles patted his back and brought him in for a manly side hug, reveling in the fact that Cam had finally called him by that moniker. "Right," Cass said as she sat in front of Wyatt and went to put her hand on top of his. Wyatt flinched, but the ropes around his wrists prevented him moving his hand away. "Relax," Cass said calmly. "I won't hurt you." "You should," Cam grumbled. Wyatt glared at him, then quickly brought his eyes back to Cass. It's no use. They made it so we can't tell you anything. Randall tried to yell a muffled reprimand at him from behind the duct tape and gave him an icy glare. If you want to get tortured, Rand, then that's on you. But I'm coming clean and telling them the truth. What's the truth, Wyatt? Cass asked. Who made it so you can't tell us, and how? Wyatt looked as though he truly wanted to say it, but every time he tried, he started stuttering, and the words got stuck in his throat. I can loosen that tongue for you, Tober offered as he held up an ice pick and a tongue clamp. Savage, Cam thought, trying to reconcile this mercenary Tober with the more centered Buddhist Tober that he had come to know. Wyatt shook his head in fear and frustration before screaming out a barrage of obscenities, finally able to get something out since it had nothing to do with what he had been trying to say. Then he hung his head in defeat. This is getting us nowhere, Hugo said. Trust me, Cass said too impatiently. She placed both of her hands on top of Wyatt's. Do you truly want to cooperate? Gosh, I'm stuttering all over this myself. She placed both of her hands on top of Wyatt's. Do you truly want to be cooperative? He raised his head and glanced over at Hugo, seemingly genuinely remorseful to have lost his friendship and respect, then nodded. Randall yelled something angrily at him that sounded something like traitor. Cale, who up to this point had been silently watching the proceedings with his normal shrewd impassiveness, went from where he was standing across the room to directly in front of Randall in less than a blink of an eye. His intimidating stare mere inches from Randall's terror-stricken face. Now you listen to me, Cale said in a low, deadly tone. That night in New York, you were there, yeah? Randall moved his head in a quick nod. That night your people tried to kill me, and I don't take attempts on my life lightly. Beads of sweat were starting to appear on Randall's brow. But not only were your people stupid enough to attack me, you nearly killed the girl. His eyes flashed with burning rage, but his voice remained cold and controlled. You watched it happen, Rand. You saw what that explosion did to her. Randall adamantly shook his head, his muffled pleas desperately trying to convey that it wasn't his fault. Cale's right hand suddenly shot out and wrapped around Randall's neck, causing the man's eyes to bulge in panic and pain as his airway was almost completely closed off. With a quick blur of movement, Cale's left hand was holding Randall's own gun against his left temple, finger poised on the trigger. He gave Randall such a withering look of threat and menace that even Cam winced in sympathy. It's too late for that bloody nonsense. Get this through your thick skull. He tapped the muzzle of the gun against Randall's skull to punctuate his words, causing Randall to whimper pitifully. Your people lost the second you harmed that girl. Understand? Cale growled. You pissed off the wrong man. I've cut off your money flow, and I've turned your powerful connections against you. The only thing your people have left is the cure for that heinous virus you've created, and it's only a matter of time before I take that as well. Your delusions of grandeur and world domination are asinine, to say the least. I am stronger, smarter, and more powerful than your people could ever hope to be, and I will not be merciful. You do not harm what is mine! He roared. The whole room was silent, both relieved that they weren't on the receiving end of Cale's wrath, and hopeful that they never would be. Now, Cale continued in a calmer, more controlled manner, your brother is being smart by trying to accommodate the victors. But unfortunately for you, that makes you superfluous. So if you want to continue living for the time being, you will be quiet and cooperative. Because all I need to do is put a bullet through your brain, he said while digging the muzzle of the gun harder into Randall's temple, or break your bloody neck with a flick of my finger to be rid of you. The choice is yours. Randall was absolutely petrified and apparently didn't answer quickly enough because Cale fainted with a twitch of his finger, and Randall let out a terrified whimper before the crotch of his pants became wet. He closed his eyes in shame, and he silently wept. Dang! He actually made the man piss his pants! Cam thought in awe, grateful to know that even though his throat and the back of his head were still sore, Cale had taken it easy on him back in that alley. That's what I thought, Cale said with a light pat on Randall's cheek as he stood up, which Randall violently flinched away from. Please, proceed, Cale invited Cass. Cass nodded and took a deep breath to gather her thoughts before bringing her attention back to Wyatt, who was now as pale as a sheet. All right, now that that is settled, let's see if I can get past that mental block of yours. She placed her hands back on Wyatt's and closed her eyes. Now don't try to speak, she instructed. Just think about what you want to tell us. After what only seemed like a few minutes, Cass gasped as she broke the connection between her and Wyatt, her eyes wide and searching as if she couldn't believe what she just gleaned from his mind. Wyatt nodded to assure her. It's all true. Cass turned to Miles, determination replacing the fear in her eyes. Can you hack into the Scion's Keep systems and control them remotely? He made a dismissive motion towards the Reinhold brothers with his good hand. With these two out of my way, it should be no problem. Good. She turned towards Cale. You truly want to avenge our girl and bring Anaximander down? He gave her a terse nod. Then there is much to do, and not much time to do it. Bennu led Ari down the twisting stairways and across the bridges through the dappled sunlight of the primordial groves. That shadow that crossed over the camera would be a fly. Get away from here, you damn flies. I thought... Oh no, chapter 34 is still coming up. It's just very short, so I guess we'll just tack it on the end of this. Bennu led Ari down the twisting stairways and across the bridges through the dappled sunlight of the primordial grove's lush understory. They passed beautifully vibrant birds and tree-dwelling animals. Some of them were made of iridescent light and energy, like her father's wings from the Katsum rune, and they seemingly possessed a sentient presence. Ari felt almost spellbound by the same atavistic music of the great song surrounding and moving through everything. She normally only felt the song when she sought it out through meditation. It was so soothing. When they reached the ground and emerged from the shadow of the grove, they began to follow a thread of that quartz-like material in the ground that wound its way throughout the vivid, wild beauty of the garden. There were a myriad of modern and prehistoric plant life, all growing side by side, all tended by Shazamin, both male and female. They all had the same silver eyes and serene demeanor as Bennu and Absalom, and represented many different human cultures from different ages. Eventually, the colorful thread wound its way towards a wall of dense foliage in the center of the garden, with a gate made of the same quartz-like material. In front of the gate stood a tiny ancient woman, her hunched shoulders draped with a shawl. She was leaning on a gnarled but sturdy walking stick, which was adorned with a large spectralite cabochon on top. Her shaza was even brighter than Bennu's, and she had markings similar to his, but only on her chin and her forehead. Her braided hair was as silver as her eyes, and her mahogany skin was as wrinkled as a walnut. It looked as though she was originally from one of the indigenous Arctic tribes. The woman exuded a warm, nurturing kindness, full of wisdom and understanding, leading Ari to believe that this must be Mother Am. When she saw Bennu and Ari approach, Mother Am gave them a welcoming, joyful smile, her eyes nearly disappearing in the folds of her skin. "Here you are at last, child," she said, holding out her hand to Ari, and Ari came over to take the ancient woman's hand in hers. "Absalom said that I would meet you before my watch was over. I've held on longer than I most likely should have," she said with a twinkle in her eye. "But his word was true." Mother Am looked up into Ari's eyes, and Ari saw the same fathomless knowledge in them that Absalom possessed. "You know Absalom?" Ari asked. Mother Am nodded. "I knew him once upon a time, back when I was brand new to the order," she said wistfully, then turned to Bennu. "So, how is our girl?" She gave Ari's hand a friendly squeeze. "No lasting effects from the hypothermia. The dark energy has been completely metabolized. Her shaza has been cleansed, and her body's internal temperature has stabilized at 2 degrees above normal," he said with a clinical detachment. "Thank you, Bennu," said Mother Am, and Bennu nodded before taking his leave. "Wait, what does that mean?" Ari asked. "How is the dark energy metabolized, and why has my internal temperature gone up?" "Nothing to worry about, child," Mother Am said with a reassuring smile. "Your shaza must have rejected the dark energy and metabolized it to revert back to its original pure state, which is a very good sign," she said with a nod and another squeeze of Ari's hand. "And as to your temperature, if my memory is correct, which it is, it will steadily increase as well as the intensity of the episodes you experience until the transition of maturity is complete." Ari figured the episodes she was referring to were the sudden heat flashes like the one she'd experienced back at Jashar's. "Will it go back to normal once the process is complete?" "That has yet to be seen," Mother Am said as she turned towards the court's gate, which opened for her after a swift movement of her walking stick. "Walk with me, child. You have many questions, and I have many answers." Ari followed Mother Am, whose head only came up to a couple inches above her elbow, and who still had a gentle but firm grip on her hand, through the maze-like corridors of foliage past the gate. The maze seemed to have an underlying symbolic meaning, which reminded Ari of her memories of the Athosite temple. "Bennu said that this place was once known as Eden. How is that possible? I thought Eden was just an allegory, a shared cultural mythos." "The Shazaman order arrived on Earth before humans even existed, to observe, record, and analyze its potential. When humans eventually emerged as the dominant hominin, they passed down stories through oral tradition across generations and continents. Heroes became conglomerates of many people, and the stories got muddied or embellished according to the whims of the teller. But the ones that last, the ones that surpass cultural boundaries and time, those are the ones that have a kernel of truth at its core," Mother Am explained. "Wait, there were Anu colonists before there were humans? I was told that the colonists arrived during the Stone Age." "The Shazaman order is not subject to the Anunnaki. It was created long before there was even sentient life in Anu," she said, and then glanced back at Ari over her shoulder. "What do you know of the Fluxi?" "Not much," Ari said with a shrug. "Only that they would genetically pop up now and then in the Anu higher races." Mother Am stopped short to look back at her fully. "And who told you that?" "Kale did. Lothan Kale, my grandfather, I guess." He's Ian. I know who Lothan Kale is. We've been keeping an eye on him since he got here. He's a good soldier, but he knows nothing of these matters. And unfortunately, that is true of most of the so-called higher races. They turned a corner and came upon a large, ornately embellished building made of the glowing white stone. The Fluxi are not some random genetic mutation. They were the first sentients to arise from the ethos after the creation of the universe. Mother Am explained as they began to ascend the steps that led to the entry of the building. They were comprised of the pure energy of the ethos and were connected by a collective multidimensional omnipotent intelligence. For untold eons, the Fluxi manipulated the cosmos to help create worlds and seed life throughout the universe. Time meant nothing to them, but as they aimlessly moved through the eternities, the Fluxi collective began to dissipate back into the ethos to transition into another state of being. But before the transition was completed, parts of the collective began to evolve into individual and cognizant beings. These beings were not as powerful as the collective, but they could still communicate through an extrasensory connection and were still more powerful than any other creation in the universe. Their new forms allowed them to focus attention on their individual sentient creations. They felt curiosity and empathy towards them, and so they spread throughout the universe and became the first chroniclers and practitioners of the sacred sciences. They set up liminally dimensional spaces to observe and gather data from. She motioned to the garden around them as an example, then sat down on the top step instead of going through the dolmen-like entryway into the building. Ari sat down next to her, leaning her elbows on her knees, trying to assimilate everything Mother Am was telling her. She was also trying to reconcile the fact that she was, or had been, one of these transdimensional entities that helped create the universe. She didn't feel like one at all. It was all too much and too ludicrous to fully comprehend or accept. The Fluxi watched and learned from the various beings throughout the universe and, when necessary, assisted in their genetic evolution to help them reach their full potential. Some of the Fluxi started feeling the need to guide and enlighten these beings that they had grown to cherish, but they knew that they couldn't directly give the finite beings access to their knowledge, because the beings wouldn't be able to exist in their powerful presence without being destroyed. So from the different planets throughout the universe, they chose to subtly evolve only certain beings that proved to be resilient enough and mentally strong enough to accept small bits of knowledge to share with others, and inspire those that could lead their people to further progression. And those chosen passed their gifts down through their bloodlines. It seemed to work reasonably well, and their beloved creations flourished and evolved into greater beings capable of civilization and transcendental thought. As Ari listened, she realized that it must have been the Shazamin who gave the seers and oracles their glimpses of possible futures. The seers and oracles were the subtly evolved bloodlines. That was why Jean-Baptiste was able to transition. But what about Adam? Is he part of the chosen bloodline? But as time passed on, Mother Am continued, the individual Fluxi began to fade and dissipate into the ethos like the collective before them. They didn't want their work to fade with them, so they chose beings from the subtly evolved bloodlines they had created to take over for them. In order for the chosen to accommodate the knowledge and power being given to them, they had to be essentially changed and transcend into the closest approximation to the Fluxi as their form would allow.
The transformation was different for each species. Certain aspects were manifested or enhanced, but the changes were acceptable for their purpose. The chosen that were able to transcend became mouthpieces between their people and the Fluxi. The more the Fluxi taught and worked with these beings in a delicate proximity, the more they desired to have the beautiful corporeal experiences of those beings' mortal lives. With the Shazaman order established, their work and knowledge secured, some of the Flexi, with the power they still possessed, evolved once more into what some would consider immortal souls, and chose to live in temporal forms. But only certain beings could accommodate their souls, and even then there was no promise that those forms would be able to handle the extent of the full power of their adult state.
Mother Am trailed off. Ari thought back to Absalom's story of his sister. Are you saying that even after all I've been through, after everything people have sacrificed for me, that I might not even survive the transition of maturity? Mother Am gave her a thoughtful look, choosing her words carefully.
I cannot say that it is not a possibility. There are no absolutes. Sometimes hidden variables lurk in the cracks and crevices we cannot see.
After everything I've endured, time after time I've had to claw my way back from the dark abyss of death. To have it end like that? It would be too cruel. Ari's head fell despondently into her hands. She was so heartsick and weary. Why are the Shazaman always so frustratingly vague about the future?
You will understand in time,
Mother Am said as she rubbed Ari's back in comforting circles.
But do not despair, child. Absalom has worked very hard for a very long time to give you the best chance of survival. He chose 2 of the strongest species of Anu, then cultivated the right attributes and the right bloodlines to achieve the impossible. And here you are.
Here I am, Ari breathed out. And what a disappointment. I'm not this awe-inspiring, perfect being that people wish me to be. I'm just me, hopelessly flawed and inadequate.
No one is under the illusion that you are perfect, child.
Ari glanced over to see the good-natured twinkle in the old woman's eyes.
Unfortunately, the eyes of the living never see their role in the grand design, how their existence and actions makes ripples across the cosmos. They lack the proper perspective.
But why? Why has Absalom gone through so much trouble for me? What is it he expects me to do?
You are the catalyst.
Yes, but a catalyst of what? What does that even mean? Mother Am shrugged noncommittally.
I assume it means exactly how it sounds. Even as hopelessly flawed as you are, look at all that you've accomplished in your short time on Earth. You've already inspired and enriched the lives of so many, and they in turn will do the same for other souls in need.
She glanced down at Ari's robotic leg as an example.
You've also purged the world of the leaders of a tenacious evil that the Order inadvertently unleashed upon the world. Even in the frenzied haze of rage and dark energy, your true light managed to shine through, and you were able to save the lives of your friends and your parents and preserve the good memory of an innocent family.
She pointed to the signet ring still on Ari's finger.
The scales are beginning to tip towards a more perfect balance. Not bad for someone so inept,
she said with a kind smile. thinking of everyone who would have been safer and better off if she'd never come to Earth. Ari still felt her faults outweighed her virtues. The weight of those counting on me lies heavily on my shoulders. Mother Am smiled and squeezed Ari's shoulder. And what strong shoulders they are. Ari was about to disagree, but then something Mother Am had said earlier struck her. Wait, the Shazaman created the shades? How? Why? Boy, this is the longest chapter yet. I hope it lets me film it all. The old woman took her hand from Ari's shoulder as she braced herself to stand up. I will show you. Curious, Ari helped Mother Am stand up and climb the last step. Once they passed through the entry into the building, Ari was struck by the beauty of the deceptively vast cathedral-like space. The structural frame was made of the glowing stone, but the walls were faceted by thousands of crystal panes displaying glimpses of things being observed, recorded, and quantified by various Shazamen. As they made their way further into the building, Ari noticed that the threads of quartz from around the garden were converging to the center of this building, culminating to a nexus in the form of an enormous quartz tree springing out of the floor and branching out in countless fractal diversions and right angles. It had the same colorful prismatic pulses running through it as the threads, but in the tree they were so much brighter and whirled around in hypnotic Fibonacci patterns. It was an alien technology, but she was immediately struck by the similarities between it and the metal tree sculpture Jamie had made and donated to her old school. Okay, I'm in Eden, and if Mother Am is keeper of the tree, that must mean... Holy Hannah, am I actually looking at the tree of knowledge? It's real? The tree was surrounded by what seemed to be a reflection pool that was as smooth as glass. Mother M led Ari to a couple of the benches situated around the pool and sat down. Ari followed suit and sat down on the bench next to her. Still in an odd daze, she was caught off guard when the bench molded itself to fit her as ergonomically as possible. Tell me what you know of the Alaksul, Mother M said, picking up the conversation where they had left off. Well, according to Jashar, they are ancient and immortal. They steal the bodies of humans so they can feel the sensations of life. Then it struck her. Isn't that what the Fluxi did? Their souls inhabiting the bodies of corporeal beings? Ari anxiously turned to Mother Am. Wait, is this body mine? Or did I take it from another soul? Mother Am patted her gently on the knee. This body is all your own, child. It's just another incarnation of your true self. Oh, whew. Okay, good. Ari sighed in relief. One less thing to feel guilty about. So, yeah, Jashar told me that the other shades, in their madness brought on by immortality, had forgotten that they had once been human, and that they worshipped an Anu colonist that happened to be a Fluxi. This coincides with what Absalom told me about his sister Utana, and the humans she cared for. So I assume that they're the same person. But after the Anunnaki killed Utana, Jashar's people wanted to avenge her, and that's when the invaders made them what they were. Mother Am scowled in thought as she looked down at the pool. Either Jashar's memory was not as accurate as he boasted, or he purposely misled you. The colonists did not make them into what they were. It was their own hubris that condemned them to their fate. She waved the spectralite cabochon on top of her walking stick over the pool. The surface rippled, and a scene of an angry mob in an ancient meeting house began to appear. The image began to be accompanied by sounds, and the speaker standing on the dais in front of the mob was riling the people up into a hysterical frenzy. Though Ari didn't recognize the language they were speaking, when Mother Ann put a hand on her shoulder, she somehow was able to understand the meaning of their words. The invaders came here to claim our world as their own and deplete its resources, the speaker intoned. They see us as inferior beings, to be enslaved and used as animals according to their whims. But are we animals? No, the mob replied uproariously. No, my brothers and sisters, said the charismatic speaker. He was a striking and intelligent man with an authoritative countenance and an attractive, easy manner, a natural-born leader. We are the favored people of the goddess, and we will not be subjugated and used as chattel. The mob cheered in agreement. The goddess who held the potential of infinite power in her young hands, who saw our worth, who spoke to us in our own tongue, educated us, and helped us rise from the dust to what we are now. She sacrificed herself to save us from the invaders' wrath. He took a second to let that sink in before he continued on. The invaders who struck down our brother and sister warriors, who slaughtered our wives, husbands, and children. They shall now feel the blade of our wrath. The mob cheered. For we are strong. Cheers. We are the favored people. Cheers. But we have limits, he conceded, bringing the crowd back down. We called to the watchers to help us, but they were deaf to our pleas of righteous vengeance. They, who promised their guardianship, abandoned us in our time of need. So I took what was owed to us. I took what will make us more powerful than the invaders. He drew everyone's attention to an incredibly beautiful woman who triumphantly held up a crystal urn full of honey-colored liquid, and the mob rejoiced. Let us all drink of the Watcher's magic elixir. Brothers and sisters, then we will avenge our goddess by becoming gods ourselves. The mob cheered in unbridled excitement as the bearer of the urn poured its contents into earthenware tankards that were passed around the crowd, and everyone eagerly took a drink and passed on the precious elixir. After everyone imbibed and rejoiced in their perceived victory, there was a bright flash, and a Shazaman entered the large meeting hall. The mob immediately quieted and cowered away from the powerful presence of the woman. You could see disbelief, anger, and despair crossing the Shazaman's face at what they had just done. Then her silver eyes met those of the charismatic leader, and Ari saw feelings of betrayal in their mysterious depths. The two of them clearly had a history, and his actions severed whatever bond they had between them. Atan, how could you have done this? The Shazaman breathed out in incredulous condemnation. The leader tried but could not keep the Shazaman's accusatory gaze. He quickly glanced towards the beautiful woman who had held the urn before he cast his eyes down in shame. Your goddess would be ashamed of what you've done, of what you've become, the Shazaman declared to the mob, horrified of the atrocities you have done in her name. You let your grief and inflated pride blind you to your own sins. You stole what was sacred. You bastardized the right of transcendence for your own base purposes, she said, looking over the crowd in disappointed disgust. Your calls of vengeance were unheeded because they are unworthy of her. Some of the people were beginning to retch and double over in excruciating pain. You are all unworthy, and now you shall reap the consequences and forever bear the mark of your shame. She spared one last look towards the leader across the room, his face a rictus of pain as the elixir worked its damage, before she turned to leave. Once she was gone, the room erupted with the tortured screeching of the mob as their bodies disintegrated and they became the dark, diaphanous forms of the shades. And Ari realized then why human worship and emotion affected and fed the shades. They were the inverse of the Shazamin, who were the human approximation of the Fluxi. That's why Jashar said they had learned about the power of sacrifice from their goddess. Mother Am took her hand from Ari's shoulder and waved the walking stick over the pool, causing the images to fade. Atan is the reason humans are forbidden to cross the veil into the garden. He abused the trust we afforded him. He let himself be tempted and manipulated by a cunning and beautiful woman, and betrayed the love Bao bore for him. Ari assumed Bao was the name of the Shazaman, and the cunning woman must have been the one with the crystal urn. We erroneously turned our backs on the Luxul and gave them time to etch their corruptive mark on the world. And unfortunately their exploits became entangled with that of the progeny of the colonists, giving rise to witch hunts and other atrocities done out of fear and ignorance. In an attempt to correct our mistake, we crafted that ring, she said, pointing to the signet ring on Ari's finger, and chose someone who we thought could handle the power given to him. Unfortunately, our trust was misplaced, and he became corrupted by power, and the ring was lost to us. Ari took off the ring and held it out to Mother Am. Here, take it, please. I don't want anything more to do with them. Mother Am took the ring in her hand. You have done enough, she said with an appreciative nod. And Ari will take over from here and finish what you have started. Mother Am closed her eyes for a moment, then looked up past Ari to a Shazaman woman of Japanese descent, walking quickly and silently towards them. She had streaks of silver in her ebony hair, and silver markings traveling down her neck, arms, and hands. She, like Bennu, seemed ageless, yet ancient, and she bowed her head to Ari and Mother Am in reverent respect as she held out her hand to receive the ring. After Mother Am put the ring in Anari's hand, both women nodded in a tacit agreement of what must be done. Then, without a word, Anari put the ring on her finger and strode away with serene purpose. The Shazman must be able to speak telepathically. Absalom really could read my thoughts. Ari turned back to stare at the smooth surface of the reflection pool, as she wondered what happened to Bao. Why wasn't she the one to take the ring? Wasn't she the one who was betrayed? Wouldn't she want to be the one to end the last of the Luxul? Bao has moved on from this plane, Mother Am said, obviously listening in on Ari's thoughts. Human transcendents do not age physically, but like the Fluxi before us, our Shazai eventually fade back into the Athos when our watch is over. Ari couldn't help looking at Mother Am's aged appearance questioningly. I did not join the order until late in my mortal life, Mother Am said with a knowing smile. I could not bear children of my own, so I became mother to the motherless. I watched over my tribe, used my ancestral knowledge to nurture and heal them with a mother's care, and passed on the messages the Watchers gave me. The order came to me with the choice when I was a young woman, but I declined at the time because my people needed me. When they came the second time, I agreed. My body was becoming too weary and cumbersome to be of much good anymore. Does it not bother you now? Ari asked, glancing at Mother Am's walking stick, which she seemed to rely on. It would be a shame for her to have to endure such a burdensome form for so long. The woman shook her head. No, child, it does not bother me anymore, she assured her, and with a wash of light, Mother Am became a much younger version of herself. Skin smooth of wrinkles, back straight and strong, her hair dark in thick braids. She smiled a beautiful, youthful smile.
Human transcendents are able to shift their appearances, and our Shazai are able to manifest into our spiritual totems to help us guard and protect those in need.
She stood up and walked a few paces away, and with another wash of light, the young woman became a mammoth made of iridescent light, like the animals Ari had seen earlier with the sentient intelligence. Ari sat there in shock at the sight of the giant luminescent mammoth, and her mind flashed back to the large metal sculpture in the Lennox's old stable. At the time, Ari had the feeling the sculpture had wanted to tell her something, but she had shaken it off just as a crazy fancy. But now, Ari thought back to the rest of Jamie's sculptures. The tree, the mammoth, the large metal men, who Ari now recognized as armored Anasaru soldiers. The solar system on the ceiling. Is Jamie an oracle? Is that why Adam could successfully transcend? They are part of the evolved bloodline? Her point being made, Mother Am sifted back to her old woman form and walked back to where Ari sat on the bench.
When I first joined the Order as a guardian, I chose to stay in a younger form. When I was chosen as the keeper of the tree, I chose to take my original aged appearance. It was who I really was, and I earned every wrinkle on this face.
She smiled, creating even more wrinkles, and Ari couldn't help smiling back. Mother Am took Ari's face in her hands and kissed her forehead, and Ari was flooded with a feeling of warm, comforting solace. Ari's eyes immediately welled with tears. She hadn't even realized just how raw and ravaged her heart and mind had felt until the pain was gone. "Thank you," Ari said, her voice quavering with emotion.
Come with me, child. Your soul is weary and it needs to heal. I will take you to a place where you can rest.
Ari took the old woman's preferred hand, but she stayed seated. "I truly appreciate that. But in order for me to be able to rest, I need to ask something of you.
Whatever you wish, it is yours,"
Mother Am said with a kind smile. "My family, the Rileys, I need to know that they're safe. Could the Order send guardians to watch over them?"
"Of course, it is done."
Ari sighed in relief, some of the emotional burden lifting off her shoulders. Standing up, Ari let Mother Am lead her away from the tree to a place where she could get some much-needed rest. That was the end of very long chapter 33. And chapter 34, we're going to try and play it through. I don't know if the video is going to cut me off, but I'd hate to make another video for just a couple pages. So we're just going to continue right on to chapter 34. Get another sip of this drink here. That was the wrong side. Dang it, and a fly did get in there. I forgot to close it. Gosh darn it. Stupid flies. Can't wait for winter. It's coming. It was nice and cloudy today. Alrighty, chapter 34. With her murky grasp on reality, Val was determined to focus on what was actually happening to her. She was floating down the bright tunnel again. She turned into a dark room, and the bright lights flickered on as she entered. Great big men in white were unstrapping her from the bed and lifting her up. and she saw where she was. No, not here. The men in white are bad. Bad things happen here. Val tried to fight against them, but her arms and legs were weak and useless. She tried to summon the rage that would awaken the power within her, but she couldn't focus hard enough. Her thoughts floated around like wisps of smoke, making it too hard to concentrate. The big men strapped her to a chair, and her head weakly fell to the side, causing her wild mass of unruly hair to fall across her face and block her vision. The sound of sharp, clacking footsteps approached. Val looked at the patch of laminate floor she could see and recognized the shiny black shoes of the man who always brought pain in his wake. The man jabbed a needle into one of the large veins on the inside of her elbow, and the burning liquid from the syringe spread up her arm and throughout her body. When the serum made its progression to her brain, her thoughts began to clear. But as her body began to gain strength again, she also felt the pain and soreness from the injuries she sustained the last time she was in this room. And now that her memories were coming back clearly, she was glad that she hadn't been able to use her ability before. When she had arrived at this horrible place, they had surgically implanted something in the back of her neck that would electrocute her whenever she would try to use her ability against them. A lesson she had painfully learned early on. An unwelcome hand swept the dark curly tresses away from her face, and she saw the face of her tormentor, Dr. Schweinhart. "There's my darling Valencia," he said, smiling at her with his crooked yellow teeth. His round spectacles reflected the garish glare of the lights, hiding the evil leer she knew was hiding behind them. "Don't call me that," Val warned. The only person who called her Valencia was her mother. She'd rather it stayed that way. "Did you learn your lesson? Are you going to be a good girl today?" Val answered him by spitting in his face. A quick blow from the meaty hand of one of the orderlies snapped her head to the side with a white burst of pain. She tasted the metallic tang of blood welling on her bottom lip. She licked the blood away, relishing the sting, as she watched Swinehart wiping her spit from his spectacles with a handkerchief, his smile becoming a scowl. "I see," he said, putting his spectacles back on and scrutinizing her with his beady eyes. "We've tried being nice, offering anything you could possibly desire, offering to make you a god amongst men, but you refuse us." It didn't matter what they offered. Val would never willingly help these monsters. Besides, even if what they offered wasn't obviously lies, they could never give her the thing she truly wanted, Ari. She still had to save Ari from the demons. "I will survive this, and I will find you again." "So we punish you over and over in hopes of helping you see the errors of your thinking," Schweinhart continued. "And yet you still resist us." He gave a bemused shake of his head, as if he pitied her ignorance. "I'll never turn to the dark side, pig lover," Val marked, trying out her new nickname for the doctor with a derisive sneer. "That's what your name means, right?" Schweinhart lifted his hand as if to strike her. She braced for the impact, but at the last second, the strike became a caress against her cheek. Val flinched away in revulsion. But he roughly grabbed her chin to keep her from turning away from him. At his touch, a primal reflex of self-preservation overrode her reason. And the rage began boiling up within her. Schweinhart saw it in her eyes and quickly let go. But as soon as the thrumming frequency began to manifest, she was seized by an excruciating shock of electric current coursing through her whole body, incinerating all focus and control. After a couple seconds, the pain stopped and her body sagged, her nerves raw and her muscles weak. Her head hung forward and bloody drool leaked from her mouth. She had bitten her tongue during the electrocution.
Your ability would be a welcome asset to the cause, but the fire of defiance burns too fiercely within your strong spirit.
He grabbed a hank of hair from the top of her scalp and lifted her head so she could look at him.
So you leave us with only one course of action.
He snapped his fingers to signal someone to enter the room.
We must extinguish that fire and break your spirit.
A woman came forward with a tray on a rolling stand that held scissors and hair clippers.
We'll start by taking those beautiful curly locks of yours,
Swinehart said before roughly releasing his grip from her hair, causing her head to fall forward again. Val spat a gob of blood on the spotless floor and grinned. You dumbasses think that cutting my hair is going to break me? You'd be doing me a favor. She used her meager strength to lift her head as she began to laugh at their stupidity. The laugh got caught in her throat when the woman grabbed a handful of her hair and started viciously hacking away at it. It hurt more than Val anticipated, but she held in her cries of pain behind a mask of apathy. You'll never break me, pig lover, she declared with a defiant glare. You'd have more luck squeezing blood from a stone. Schweinhart smirked and folded his arms as he watched the woman cleave off clumps of Val's hair, obviously not impressed with her declaration. He met Val's hateful stare with a look of eager anticipation, and it chilled her to the bone.
We shall see about that, Valencia. The fun has only just begun.
And that was the end. The end of Catalyst by Lisa Beeson. Chapter 34. We have finished. Ha ha! Transcendent. Oh dear goodness, what was the next one? Outlier. And now Catalyst. Yeah! I wonder, I forget whether there's 2 more or 1 more. I think there's actually 2 more books. I think I saw that and was like, we get 2 more books? It might be. I have to see. We'll have to see. Okay, so exciting. That was very, very long, but it was the finale. And we're going to take a break and then probably read The Tale of Emily Winsnap. Isn't that a nice cover? I tell you, these are some good covers. Thank you for joining me. 5 subscribers. How about that? For the finale, we have 5 subscribers. How very exciting indeed. Oh, and then we get a visit from the baby. My Annie girl. My little baby girl. Isn't she beautiful? Isn't she such a sweetie pie? Oh, mama's coming. Oh, the mama's coming. My Gabby girl. My shitty baby girl. Mwah. Mwah. Yes, you goof nut. Alrighty, I guess we're gonna cut this. Yes, you baby butt. Thank you, and fare thee well. Join us for whatever the next book is going to be. We might try to start on Twilight again as well. Yes, you baby girl. I love you. I love you. You goof. Mwah. Peace.